a sound check with Andy to make sure he's good. He can hear us. Andy,
Hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Quite loud. Yes.
Do I get to be the voice of God today?
yeah, you kind of were. That was really loud.
Nice.
Is that more acceptable?
Yeah, we can actually hear him. Maybe they can hear us. That's a bonus compared to yesterday. So.
Two-way sound here. And they're seeing dais. Sweet. I think we're good to go. Problem solving, learning, progression. I'm gonna go get some popcorn. I just ate a bunch of curry, but I'm gonna.
Kelsey is absent this evening. We're anticipating that Lena should be here on time. If she's not, I think I might. Andy, would you be able to run it if Lena's unavailable?
I can run it from here if that's okay with you guys.
We did it several times over the course of the past year. So
Sure.
we can do that.
Yeah.
I'm still anticipating Lena might make it on time, but I have not talked to her. I know Cheryl did, so we shall see.
Okay.
Or under the wire.
Under the gun.
Under the wire was her
You
word.
see her.
Approaching the building.
Nice.
She is approaching the building. You're off the hook.
Okay.
Yay.
Hello.
We'll see where.
Oh, I'll see.
Like Dave and I.
Well, you're gonna be on in about probably a half hour, 45 minutes or so. So you can sit wherever you'd like back there. Okay. Once you are here, you can go to the table.
I walked by the lectern and like wherever the vent is over there, it's sweating.
Oh, there's that.
Oh, the 3 applications? Yeah, wow. Lakeville, Fleet Streets. Yeah, it was less than 3 hours though. It's nothing compared to council.
I listened to all of it, so.
Yeah.
Because I needed to go to countywide and I figured I'd better know some of that.
Oh, Lakeville, or.
Yeah, Lake Hill. And then I wanted to know it for when things came back up again.
So Cheryl is actually sending out advertisements. We're planning on doing that the first week after the new council, newly elected council is seated. So that would be interviews, I think, on May
You're in
6th
charge.
is the day, the first Tuesday in May. So it's like May. First Tuesday in May.
Right outside.
You get to bang the gravel, the gavel. Mhm.
Whenever you're ready, we're about a minute away, so.
Yeah, you let me know when we're about to start and I'll start the recording.
All right. Where do I bang this?
Just hit it.
So I apologize. I haven't done this before, but it's 6 o'clock, so I'm calling the, 5 o'clock. Sorry, 5 o'clock, calling the March 3rd, 2022 Planning Commission meeting to order. Cheryl, could you please call a roll?
Commissioner Franken,
Here.
Commissioner Lesbus,
Here.
Commissioner Kane,
Here.
Commissioner Gleason.
Here.
Commissioner Stabile,
Here,
Commissioner Withrow, and Commissioner Stupian are both absent from the meeting tonight. Quorum is present.
Okay. This is a meeting of the Fiscal Planning Commission. The purpose of the meeting is to provide citizen review and recommendations on planning-related matters identified on the evening's agenda to the town. The next agenda item is the minutes and the approval of the February 3rd, 2022 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes? And is there a motion?
Find them very nice and I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Great. what was it? You have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call? Or,
Commissioner Franken,
Abstain. I wasn't present.
thank you. Commissioner Lesbus,
yes,
Commissioner Kane,
Yes,
Commissioner Gleason,
Yes.
Commissioner Stabile,
yes,
all right, motion passes. Next, we have public comments that are not on the agenda. Is there anybody from the public that would like to comment, make a comment on anything that is not on tonight's agenda? I don't see anybody in the room and no one on the Zoom call is raising their hand. So I don't see anybody wanting to make a comment. Okay, at this moment, we will start on the next agenda item, which is planning file numbers MAJ 220001 and CU 22-0001. A sketch plan review of the major site plan application for adding 30 residential units to the triangle parcel of the infill site more commonly known as the Alpine Inn, in a conditional use application to allow a residential use of household living on the site while retaining the existing permitted commercial use of lodging facilities.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Temporary Chair for this evening, Planning Commissioners. This application is for a project called, now known as Base Camp Studios, MAJ 22-001 and conditional use 22-001 as well. I do have a little presentation that's not quite showing up on the screen yet.
It was unpresented because it was showing.
Give it 2 seconds for that to come on. 1 second.
Zoom call. I just need to change the.
So we can see in chambers here.
The clerk PC or staff PC.
Not quite. There it is. All right. Oh, great. We have the technology. So, this application is for a project called Base Camp Studios. This is to create 30 new residential units on the Alpine, the property that's currently occupied by the Alpine Inn. This will be 2 buildings with a total of almost 14,000 square feet of residential space. All the parking will be by surface parking. This is located in the Gateway Zone District, so multi-unit residential buildings are a conditional use in the Gateway Zone District. So the applicant at this time is requesting feedback on both the sketch plan as well as the potential conditional use application. The property is bounded by I-70 on the north, the Summit Suites, formerly known as the Baymont Inn on the east, and then the Frisco Transit Center to the southeast and the Base Camp Outer Range Brewing and that development to the southwest. The site, so this parcel it's an odd shaped parcel. As you can see, it's a triangular parcel, about 2.5 acres in size. It was platted originally in 1973. As you can see here, the current Alpine Inn is located in the northeast corner of the property. That was originally constructed in 1994. And then prior to the construction of the Alpine Inn, there was a snow storage easement that was created in the central part of the lot right here, I'm highlighting with my cursor. That snow storage easement is for the benefit of the Frisco Station development. So that's where the Walmart and Safeway and those all those other businesses have their snow storage. Recently, actually about a month ago, planning staff approved a planning application to relocate that snow storage easement from this current location to the very extreme westerly portion of the property. It met all town standards for that. However, we have received a public comment today from an attorney representing the Frisco Station that they have not yet executed that snow storage easement. As this is still a preliminary sketch plan application for this, can certainly go ahead and move forward. Once you get to the final site plan approval, if the application proceeds to that point and the easement has not been resolved, that certainly could be a condition of approval. No building permits will be issued if that easement is not relocated. So again, that's the applicant moving forward at their own risk if they so desire. But again, that the easement will have to be formally recorded and relocated before any building permits will be issued. So the conditional use itself, and moving back to this, in the Gateway Zone District, the conditional use is required for any residential uses in Gateway Zone. The conditional use permit under the code, it does allow for, it has 6 basic criteria on that. Because this is a concurrent processing and review of it with a sketch plan, this is an opportunity for basic feedback. You're not taking an action on the conditional use at this time. But would like to give you that opportunity to provide feedback on the criteria to the applicant. The criteria are up on the screen. They're in the staff report as well, so I'm not going to read them all in detail. But ultimately, at the end of this, or once you get to the major site plan, the planning commission can provide approval without conditions, approval with conditions, or denial of the conditional use. If you are inclined as a planning commission to grant the conditional use, you may want to think about potential conditions which could be applied in order to mitigate any potential impacts that the conditional use may have on surrounding properties. Moving on to that, development standards. I'm going to only highlight and focus on the development standards which are not apparently met at this stage of the application. And again, and also standards where it may be worth feedback to the applicant on those from the planning commission. So some of these key standards are non-vehicular access. This is highlighted because we are now placing a residential use in a commercial area, and it's a conditional use. I think the access is probably adequate for the current vehicle-oriented commercial uses that are present in this area. The question maybe for planning commission to consider is the proposed non-vehicular access, pedestrian and bicycle access, is that adequate for the additional of residential uses into this area? You can see here on the left is the proposed access points, the sidewalk along the front of the property, a sidewalk of the bridge over the detention basin to attach to some existing sidewalks in the base camp area. That is the extent of the proposed non-vehicular access to this property at this time. On the right is again, just a current aerial view of the conditions. You can see some crosswalks that are there. Actually, the last time I was out there, those crosswalks aren't there because they've been scraped off by snow removal. And then you can see some maybe limited access to the properties to the east, such as the transit center over here, as well as some of the other commercial facilities further on down Washer Court. Additional development standards, and this is another one that's related to the residential use and really the focus on residential use that's part of the conditional use permit. And that's related to bicycle parking. Under the residential development standards, one space is required for bicycle parking for each bedroom. So for that, that's a total of 30 units. In the application, the applicant included some existing bike racks over at the Alpine Inn. Those actually can't count unless the applicant wanted to provide the appropriate number of bike spaces for both the Alpine Inn as well as the new base camp studios. So additionally, in addition to bike racks, there is a requirement for enclosed bicycle spaces in residential use. Half of those spaces have to be enclosed. At this point, none are shown. Additional comments, and now we get into some of the development standards. As this is a mixed-use development technically, because it is on a parcel with an existing commercial use, which is the Alpine Inn, the non-residential development standards do apply to this. Some of the keys here I'll just highlight are facade standards, building elements, and articulation as standards that may not be met at this time or may require additional information. In particular, I'll highlight a couple. The articulation does require a significant amount of breaks along any building's facade that's greater than 54 feet in length. And as you can see, this length is actually 160 feet. There's a single break. So this does not meet the articulation standards at this time. Similarly, the roof standards require that no more than 66% of the roof line is at any particular elevation. Based on the information presented at this time, it's not clear whether or not that standard is met. So calling it out at this point in time so that the Planning Commission can request additional information from the applicant, and the applicant can provide additional detail at the next stage of the at their next submittal. Here we are with the roof standards again. Again, you see some very simple roof forms. Maybe the elevation view isn't the greatest, and maybe there are additional breaks. However, we don't have that information at this point in time. Moving along, a couple other, and this is maybe a little bit more of a minor standard, but it is a concern again, because we are placing a residential use in a commercial area. We want to make sure that the parking for that is buffered as required by the code. If we're only looking at the new residential portion of the development, about 10 of the new 30 parking spaces are in front of the proposed buildings, and that's these over here, and in this area here. Under the code, that you can have some parking in front of the building as long as it is buffered. However, in this case, the landscaping is minimal. There's also discussion about buffering along property lines in this from parking areas. In this case, this entire back line, as you recall, is the property line with I-70. Maybe able to give some feedback on whether or not that particular standard is being met with the landscaping as shown. Finally, staff has compiled a number of comments and places where you may be able to provide feedback to the applicant. Again, without reading them all, as you do have the staff report, some of the highlights are feedback on the proposed conditional use to allow the multi-unit residential use, potential conditions if you are inclined to approve a conditional use once the full major site plan submittal has been submitted. Feedback on non-vehicular access, the compatibility with neighborhood character and in relation to nearby properties, compliance with facade standards related to building elements, articulation and variation in wall planes, feedback on roof design and compliance with roof standards, and then finally, building materials, colors and design, and the parking lot landscaping. So again, that's the high points. Happy to answer any questions you may have. I do also have the full submittal from the applicant available to review if you have some particular questions on any of their design drawings.
Great. Thanks, Don. Great presentation. At this point, we will, if the commissioners have any questions of staff on the staff report. Patrick, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm a little bit fuzzy on the snow report letter that we got as
From public comment.
public comment. We're supposed to submit it when and what's been agreed to. Can you just like timeline that for us really quick?
Sure. So the snow storage easement that was recorded in 1986 is for the benefit of the Frisco station. That easement has some interesting terms in it where essentially that the relocation can occur with approval and notice to the beneficiaries, which is the Frisco station. However, they do ultimately have to execute a new easement. The applicant for this project in cooperation with the Alpine Inn, who's still the owner of the parcel, requested a relocation of that snow storage easement so they could proceed with this project. The application itself met all requirements from the town code as it relates to the physical elements of the snow storage, the drainage, the design, the area required for snow storage in relation to the parking area over at the Frisco station. However, there has not, so planning staff did approve that administrative approval. There's been no changes to it yet. They'd have to get a grading permit in order to do so and a few other things down the road. That said, the attorney for the Frisco station submitted a letter, I believe dated February 24th, that indicated they have not yet come to that agreement. From our standpoint, that agreement can occur anytime up and prior to a building permit being submitted and applied for. We cannot issue a building permit for something that's in an existing easement.
So as proposed, it's a workable solution.
Correct.
It's just not legally agreed to.
That is absolutely correct. Yes. Yep.
And then how about the landscape buffer? Some of the lack thereof sidewalk. So that was noted as a particular concern. I'm just curious, is there an exception or is there a way that we can put more sidewalk? Closer side of the parcel, because right now it's pretty sketchy. Yeah. The way that it's shown, and I'm just curious if there's a way through the town process to.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm throwing it back up on the screen a little bit, and this is the actual application itself, where there's a little bit more scale to it. Short answer is yes, and that could be one of the conditions that the planning commission imposes. Again, you're putting a residential use in a commercial area. You want to make sure that you're mitigating those potential impacts there. So as you noted, there is no sidewalk on the north side of Lusher Court at all. The proposal by this application is to place one very close to the development itself, but that really wouldn't be suitable for any public use or continued connections there. There is a crosswalk proposed at this location here from the bridge to here, which would get them over to the Outer Range Brewing facility there. There's limited connections over in this area, which would take you to the transit center. If you're actually going to the transit center from here, we'd actually follow through the base camp development and then cross over that way because there is no sidewalk connection over in this area. Continuing down over towards Safeway and some of those other commercial areas, it's also very limited sidewalk. So short answer is yes, the planning commission could impose a requirement for offsite improvements, including sidewalks as a condition of this application. And since this is the Lusher Court right of way, that could be placed in there with approval from the town under a license agreement.
Okay, and last question. In your background, it says on May 3rd, 2012, planning commission unanimously voted 7-0 to approve the development application for Alpine Inn to add almost 2,200 square feet of gross floor area. That was approved, but just never happened?
No, I believe that did occur, and I think it was a conversion of space. I didn't do a lot of research into exactly what that was. The current Alpine Inn is somewhere in the ballpark of 20,000 square feet. And I don't know if that was a manager's area or what. I did not do a lot of research on that.
Thank you, Patrick. Ira?
Sure, I thank you, Patrick, also, because the sidewalks and bike paths, I think, are a critical item to be looked at, and maybe, like you say, required. So it's a commercial entity in its entirety, if we look at it now, and this is like a residential component, which will be adjacent to I-70. So is there any addressing safety concerns with residents backing up to I-70?
Not at this time, and there is enough of a buffer because it is the I-70 right of way. If I go zoom back out, presentation, I think you can see on here. It doesn't, it's actually zoomed in too far, but there is a fair amount of distance between the actual property line and the I-70 pavement as well. So I don't know that there's a huge concern for safety from that. I think certainly noise could be a factor
Noise was
for
another one of my
backing up to the
next-
highway there.
next Questions, yeah.
Yep.
And then the use of the building, if it's built and approved, is the use come under our purview, whether it's going to be for sale units or rental units?
That's a great question, and I'll leave that to the applicant. At this point in time, it has not been defined whether it's going to be for sale, for rent, whether it's going to remain as one big building, whether it's going to be condominiumized. The application doesn't have any of that information at this point in time.
Is any of that in the purview of our recommendations?
Uh,
The ability to talk to that point.
Yeah, you could certainly discuss it, but I don't know that it's anything you could put a condition on. I think it is certainly something that you could ask the applicant. If you do feel that as a planning commission that a condominium type use would not be appropriate there, you could certainly say that and discuss that as part of your conditional use, that it remain in single ownership.
And I think you said the applicant is also the owner of the Alpine Inn.
The owner of the Alpine Inn has consented to this application. The applicant is actually the original developer of the base camp area, Bryn Gray. Or this is a subsidiary or whatever, another company that's associated
Get
with Bryn
another
Gray.
LLC.
It's the same guys,
Got it.
different LLC.
All right, I'll move on. Pass.
Okay. Andy, we'll go to you on the Zoom call.
Great, thanks, Lena. Quick question, Don, on the site plan, there seems to be a setback off the property line, and we've got parking. There, what I see are 3 parking spots that cross that setback. Does town have any problem with that?
I did not see parking crossing the setback, actually. What sheet
Can
are
you
you
pull
on?
up, can you pull up A 0.03 site plan?
I think I can. A003.
Yeah, that's the one I'm looking at anyway. It shows a setback on there, and it shows 3 of the potential parking spaces getting clipped by that. Almost there. Yeah. So if you zoom in, like those 2 right there, you see that
Ah.
setback line. And so that one right there is getting clipped, and then up at the west end, one of the ADA spots is getting clipped almost in half.
That one is right there.
Another spot getting clipped there. Is that allowed?
You know, I'll have to take a closer read at the code and see if that is a code issue. And certainly we'll note that. And if it is an issue, it'll be fixed before the next submittal.
Okay. Just curious how we treat those. My other question is, I know in the past we've had discussions about buildings, proposed buildings having excessive similarity to other buildings that are already built in town or under construction or exist in town. This building looks an awful lot like some buildings we already have in town, some buildings that are about to get built maybe over on School Road. A lot of similarity here, a lot of copy clipping going on. I'm just wondering, does that apply to this type of project, or is that for a different kind of project when we look at excessive similarity?
And I think a lot of that is in the eye of the beholder, because it does talk about, at least the standards talk about compatible with the general vicinity and the immediate vicinity and how much duplication is there. I think you could certainly have that conversation with the applicant about the similarity. Again, at this point in time, I don't know that staff would consider that any of the facade standards have been met at this point in time because of the articulation and some of the other design issues.
Right. Yeah, we're going to get into that for sure. But I'm just curious because I know excessive similarity with projects has come up on other applications in the past. And I wasn't sure if that was applicable for this or if for some reason we weren't supposed to be looking at that.
No, I think it is applicable. I guess the standard there is this in the vicinity? Is this far enough away from some of those other projects, whether that similarity doesn't apply? And that again can be in the eye of the planning commission.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for staff. Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Andy. Robert?
So is this gonna stay one property?
I don't know, as Ira, it's very similar to Ira's question there. The applicant hasn't provided any information whatsoever on that. At this point, it's in time, it's been submitted as a single property currently occupied by the Alpine Inn in a snow storage easement. We have no other information.
So wouldn't the normal, well, second question, How big is the easement?
The snow storage easement, I'd have to pull my notes from the other application file, but I believe it's in the ballpark of 19,000 square feet or so roughly.
So when you calculate how many units you can put on a piece of property, wouldn't you count the whole piece of property, not just the building site?
And that is what we did here in this.
And does
particular
that,
case.
but you said it could take 39, but they're only building 30, but wouldn't the hotel rooms then count also?
The hotels do not count as residential space. So this is, when we're talking density, it's only the actual residential units. When we talk commercial, that's where we get into lot coverage.
So you could over density this property technically if that hotel was full every night, for example.
No, because again, the density only applies to the residential units. The parking, the Alpine Inn has adequate parking for the Alpine Inn use, and the residential use here has adequate parking for the residential uses. So there is no over density. The only way there would be a density question is, let's say the Alpine Inn converted to residential use.
Excuse me, I'm gonna have to. But wouldn't you count? Wouldn't you normally look at a property in its whole and say, how many units could it have?
Mhm.
But so you can have more density on half the property, which is about what you've got,
Yeah.
than what you would normally put on a piece of property in town.
Absolutely. And frankly, we do that several times with bonus density and workforce.
Well,
housing units.
but then we're getting something for it. We're getting bonus density and we're not getting anything for this kind of density on a piece of property.
That's correct. And again, they are meeting the minimum, the density standard, though. They are actually below the density standard and density requirement. Because the hotel commercial use does not count against density.
Right. And the easement doesn't count against them.
That is correct.
Not totally fair in my view, but was there any conversation about workforce housing on this property?
I've had that conversation with the applicant. They've at various times through pre-submittal conferences, the applicant, and certainly the applicant should respond to this as well. They've indicated this is designed to be for the workforce. However, under our code definition, we have a very specific definition of what qualifies as workforce housing. So because that is not defined in the application to meet that definition, I will not refer to this, and staff will not refer to this as a workforce housing project.
I'm done.
Thank you, Robert. So I'm totally unclear. Is the new easement the same size as the old easement?
The new easement is slightly smaller, but it does meet the requirements per the code, per the land use and development code for the size of a snow storage area. The old easement may have been too large
Okay.
or larger than what is required.
And that's based off pavement in the parking lot
Yeah,
or
we have a
something?
requirement of 100 square feet of snow storage area for every 350 square feet of paved surface area.
Okay. Can you talk about, I didn't understand when you were talking about the landscaping and the buffering of the parking lot in the front door of the building.
Yeah.
I'm
So-
confused.
Couple things here, and this is again a challenge when you're adding a new use on a mixed use parcel. How much of the existing use do you consider when you're looking at things such as landscaping? Similar to this, and we have a little bit of a precedent that was set with the Centura Studios application about whatever, 6 months or so ago, about a year or so ago when that went through. As you can see, when we look at this overall, actually, I'll go to the landscaping plan. It's got a better indication of it. As you can see from the current landscaping of the Alpine Inn, it's relatively sparse and certainly would not meet the requirements for under the code for buffering of the lands or of any parking that's in front of the building. It just simply would not meet that between the right of way and the parking area. There's about 40 spaces in here. They're all in front of the building.
So you were talking about landscaping, sorry to interrupt you, landscaping and buffering for the existing Alpine Inn parking lot.
I was actually, on that particular section, I was focusing on the new development
Okay.
portion and the new parking areas on that. Against, it is a challenge when you're looking at an addition to an existing site, how much you do to the other portion of that site. So for this particular standard, focused on the buffering of the new parking spaces. As Andy pointed out, a couple of these may be clipping the setback line. However, there's these parking spaces in this area I would consider in front of the building itself, as well as these and this parking, these two parking spaces over here are the visitor parking spaces for this development. So as a result of that, I think there is certainly some portion of the parking that's in front of the building and would need to meet that buffering standard.
Okay, so basically those two parking spaces next to the dumpster? Yeah,
Those two there, also these in this area here.
Okay,
And these in this area over here. to the
oh,
west of
okay, and as of this moment, you, the staff, don't think that that's being met?
I don't think there's been adequate buffering of that.
Okay, great. And then my other question is, so the hotel technically right now is long-term rental housing, right?
The Alpine Inn was master leased by Summit County, I think effective July 1st of last year. It is being used. It still is transient housing. They do have a master lease on it though. So there's no kitchens in it. So they're not actually considered dwelling units at this point.
Oh, okay, so it's because they don't have a kitchen, because technically it's not a hotel. It's not functioning as a commercial, it's a commercial entity like a hotel. And so from a density perspective, I guess I could argue that they'd be going over density sort of.
Yeah, and I certainly, we consider that as a staff as well, but at this point in time, because they still only have one kitchen in that entire Alpine Inn for the manager's unit. Those units are not considered dwelling units because they do not have a kitchen.
Okay, and they could never be converted if this development gets approved, because now there's not enough density.
They could if but they'd have to meet density requirements at that point in time. If this development goes through as proposed, there'd be still 9 units of density that would be available on this property. If the Alpine Inn was to convert and deed restrict 20, trying to do quick math, about 20 or so of those units to 100% AMI and meet our code requirements, they could have 20 units and then 20 units of the deed restricted in order to make that happen. I think the math was off on that. Sorry.
Sure, no, it's fine.
But
Whatever the
theoretically,
numbers are.
if they deed restricted some portion of the converted units, they could do that.
Couldn't we make the argument that these guys only have 9 units, and so,
Not at this time, because there is no commercial, there are no density units. There's no units of density currently existing on the property.
If this project gets approved and built,
Mhm.
could they split the property and then suddenly be over density?
Yep.
And what happens then?
Well, if they split the property, we wouldn't allow the subdivision because they would be over density. If they just wanted to divide the property in half,
So they can never, so that if this is approved, they'll never be able to subdivide this property.
depends, they couldn't just do a straight subdivision and split it in half. They could condominiumize it.
Can't decrease the lot size.
But they could split it in half if they deed restricted part of this new building too, right?
That is another option for them as well.
wait, what was that, Andy?
They could split the lot in half and have each building on a separate parcel if they deed restricted a portion of each building.
That is also true.
Because it'd be density bonus, or why? Why is that?
Right.
Correct, exactly. It would fall under the density bonus provisions. Again, this is all getting into some speculation, and it's a good conversation, and I think it would be worthwhile to have that conversation with the applicant and get some feedback on what their intentions are as
Sure.
well.
Okay, well, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Certainly.
We'll now have the applicant make their presentation. I think everyone's on Zoom.
Good evening. I still says I'm disabled from sharing my screen. I do have a couple of slides to put up. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, just. a little
Okay. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Good evening, and thanks for having us tonight. My name is Michael Ann Marchand, and I'm the development manager for Bryn Gray Partners. And to begin, I'd like to quickly introduce the rest of my team. Joining me tonight is David O'Neill, founder and CEO of Bryn Gray Partners, Tom Lyon of Wolf Lyon Architects, and Ronnie Pelucio of Polona Architects and Urbanists. Many of you may be familiar with our team from our past work throughout Summit County, the Wellington and Peak One neighborhoods, Centura Studios, and setting the context for our conversation tonight, Basecamp. Also, to round out our team, we've got our civil engineer, Don Lineweber of Civil Insight, and our landscape architect, Megan Tesson of Norris Design. Basecamp began with a vision back in 2014, and as you can see here was an open field framed by exceptional views of Peak One. Over the years, Basecamp has grown into a thriving and vibrant community center with establishments that have become part of daily life for locals and visitors alike. A few notable examples, which you are all likely familiar with, are Whole Foods Market, Outer Range Brewery, and the Stedman Clinic, just to name a few. Sales tax collections at Basecamp represented 16% of Frisco's total sales tax collections in 2020. And at the end of the day, we're very proud that it's ended up being one of the world's highest transit-oriented developments due to its proximity to the Frisco Transit Center. Excuse me, my slide is a little out of order. This next slide is a photo of Basecamp residences, and this is where I'll turn it over to Ronnie Pelucio.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you again. Just a little admin moment here. The first Planning Commission member that spoke, who we couldn't see on the screen, but we couldn't hear them either. And I just wanted to mention that because we're really interested in hearing everybody's feedback tonight. So I'm not sure if there's a microphone issue there, but we want to make sure we get that when it comes time for our discussion and upcoming conversation. Anyway, Michael, thank you for that introduction. I really wanted to start by saying that there's two things that we'd like to focus on tonight. There's a lot of points that staff brought up, which we're very eager to discuss with you in general. And I think staff's report was wonderful. And in fact, our pre-application meeting, I thought was very successful as well. That being said, we were really hoping to focus just our part of the presentation on the conditional use request and the design of the buildings. And so we were going to start by talking about this slide and then transition over to a 3D model that's going to let us kind of fly around and talk about mostly the building design aspects, many of the questions that came up about articulation as well. But to talk about the conditional use request, we really feel like it's important to talk about the greater context. And so we put this diagram here. We know that you know your community, but this site is just a wonderful site to add residential units. We understand that there is a housing shortage and that there's limited land and, it's undesirable to expand into open space. And this is an underutilized infill site that's in your community that is adjacent to many, many amenities, including many of the buildings that this team has worked on, including the Whole Foods building and the brewery. Not to mention that it's close to, or to leave out that it's close to Safeway, Walmart, and I would also say the transit center. So, I'm just going to say there's a synergy here that allows us to add residential to a site that benefits the residents, where they can live, work, and recreate within walking distance to their front door. And then conversely, those residents can help support the local economy that's right outside their front door. We really believe, hearing your question here in general, it's like, is this too much stuff at this location, regardless of the code for a second, because we know that the code allows to put more residential units here. It's like, is there too much stuff here? We really think this is the place for units for all the reasons that I mentioned. And I think they meet broader issues addressing global issues about carbon reduction. As we will demonstrate, these units have opportunities for bike storage, They are well connected with a network of streets and connection to the trail systems. And then obviously they're so close to the transit center. So, there's a de-emphasis on the vehicle. We think it hits all of the points there. And we're hoping to, get that conditional approval for the use request that we have. I wanted to kind of turn the attention over to the 3D model here. So I'm going to have to take the screen here for, oh, well, actually, Michael, can you go to the next slide? We kind of hopped back and forth on the this building. Okay, so this building is not the building that we're proposing. I'm sure it's recognizable. And, Andrew, thoughtfully was saying, you don't want too much repetition of the same thing. And I know that this is not the building he was referencing, but this is a building that is on the campus that this team has helped to design and develop. And it is the only other residential use on that site. And it's different than the other buildings on that property. We'll show you in this 3D model how, but I really wanted to just for a moment look at this and say, we believe, and we've had very positive feedback about the disposition of the entirety of that campus of buildings, but we believe that this is checking a lot of the boxes in terms of what it's meant to do in terms of its character. And that is be compatible with the adjacent context of commercial use and also represent itself as a residential use. So the traditional forms that you see here of the forward-facing gables, mixed together with opportunity for private outdoor space that help animate the outdoor areas. And then also the articulation through color changes and window composition help to both reference what we would say is a more traditional residential look, as well as reference and be compatible with the rest of the campus of commercial buildings. And we're going to come back to this, I'm sure, like in my presentation, and then also hope to hear from you about it. But Michael, I'll share the 3D model image here. All right. I'm not sure if you can see my screen. Is that something you can see? I can see Andrew very clearly. Can you see Andrew? Okay, so, we're doing this remotely and there are times in which this is going to get glitchy. If that's the case, I would love for you guys to hear and stop me because I really want to show you what this is. So this image here is in your packet and it is of the buildings that we're proposing. And once again, there's 30 residential units. They're composed into 2 buildings. They were on that triangular parcel that you were looking at on the site plan image that we were showing a minute ago. In the foreground, there's an outdoor space that is that common area that is really an opportunity to offer public space for the residents and to give them a little bit of a buffer between, the residential use and then the non-residential uses in front of them. We're going to come back to these buildings in a second, but I just want to point out Lusher Court is in the foreground. This brown car is on Lusher Court. And this building on the right is the brewery. The gray building in the background is the Alpine Inn. We just didn't render it yet, but we do have a really good document of the rest of the buildings on this campus because, as you know, we worked on those buildings as designers and developers. And you can see that as you back out from the site, that our proposed building location really helps to anchor the north end of this campus. Generally speaking, that's the north and this is the south, although the angle of this property is skewed a little bit. And while this image here is buffering, here we go. So there's a building in the foreground that we didn't render. It's right here. It's the Pinnacle building. But we have the rest of them and we left that out so you could see kind of this triangular shape of buildings, as well as to see how that northern building proposed anchors the complex. It does 2 things. Again, this reciprocal relationship. It helps to create a buffer for the campus of buildings like on the north side against the highway, which is behind them. And then it also helps these buildings have opportunity for views and access to southern light across the open area between buildings of the plaza. The way that we did that is we strategically located parking on either side in kind of this dumbbell fashion on either side of our proposal. That helps to get the buildings where we would like them so that they can anchor that location, as well as be convenient for the residents who can access, parking for themselves. But also it helps to break up what could be a larger pool of parking into two smaller pools, de-emphasizing the car and putting the focus on the buildings. I'm just gonna kind of fly down here for a second. This is the 3D model of the building that we were showing you the image of a moment ago. That's already constructed on site. You can see the forward-facing gables. You can see the horizontality of other aspects of the building. And again, the asymmetrical composition of windows and the material changes. Just to note, there's a ground floor plate here, and then there are units with lofts above. So it's kind of like ground floor and then unit and a unit and a half or 2 stories above that is all part of one unit. So the southeast corner of the site, which is on the right-hand side now, and the north corner of the site, again, have this kind of dumbbell relationship of residential use at this location. And going back to the conditional use, this really helps to animate the plaza. Obviously, there's the economic benefit that I was describing a moment ago, and then the availability of resources. But it does this really wonderful daily life thing as well. That is, it brings the presence of people there 24 hours a day. So, that provides security. Again, it animates the public realm. And it just helps make this a more vibrant place. And as the conditional use talks about bringing greater balance of uses, we think that the addition of more residential use on this site only adds value to it. So we're going to zoom in to the site here. And Andrew, since I see you, I'm just going to single you out. Is this running smoothly on your side? Can you see okay, good. And so we're just going to zoom into the building. Okay, we know that in the packet, there's a couple of images that show these buildings flat on. And, that's a very common architectural practice where you look at a building in elevation. It's just like a 2D representation of the building. In real life, you never see it like that. And in this case, in particular, we have an L-shaped proposal. So you'll always get a building that is mostly in front of another building, and you will always see this at ground level. So some of the articulation standards, in particular for roof lines that come up, we think, aren't going to be viewed as described in the document, and they truly will be viewed as shown here. So, when we designed these buildings, we designed them to meet the intent language of your code, which is for them, as Don was saying, to be compatible with the context. And as we were the designers of the context, we kind of feel like we have an expertise. And we think that this design proposal does that. I'm going to fly around. We're going to talk a little bit about the aspects of the design that provide articulation, but I kind of want to just rotate around for a second and then again, get up over the building. I know that there are some questions about the circulation patterns that have to do with how these residents might access the greater community. And we can talk about that pedestrian circulation and where the sidewalks are. We thought it would be interesting to have some sort of bridge element that was a connector that was actually also decorative. It might not end up in this location, and we might end up modifying the sidewalk system. We have some ideas about that, and I'm sure you do as well. But we just want to say, like, the design intent here is to create some connectivity. And in fact, having these buildings here, as I was saying, it helps with what's happening in the common area between these buildings, but also helps to animate what's happening along Lusher Court. I think it only provides a better gateway to the community. So ground floor units and second floor units. Second floor units also occupy the third floor in the form of a loft, much like the other base camp residence building on site. Ground floor units have direct access to the courtyard. So they have doors and porches on the courtyard side. Second floor units also have these outdoor porches. They're covered porches, and they all have opportunity to face this common space. Again, bringing life and bringing a little bit of private outdoor space for all of the residents. Each of these porches also have storage. So there are storage lockers on every one of these units. Every unit front has a porch, every unit has a storage locker. And those storage lockers and the porches bring articulation to the front of these buildings that I think that the plan and the elevation and the 2D representation really do a disservice describing. I'm just gonna kind of float around this. The second floors of these buildings are serviced, vertically serviced. So it's like where are the stairs at the non-courtyard side of the buildings. Okay. Oh, sorry. Tom was just mentioning to me that there's this important feature to mention here, which is there are a couple of ways in which you access the second floor. So second floors are accessed again at the non-courtyard side via a set of stairs. The larger building has stairs on either end at the non-courtyard side, and then it also has a set of stairs in the middle of that building, so that residents can come off the courtyard, go up through the courtyard to access their second floor units, which we thought, again, was valuable as a valuable option, also helps break up the overall building. You can clearly see here how parking is pooled on either side of these buildings, and the trash and recycling collection systems are both on the northeastern side. And rotating around, you can see that the storage units at the backs or on the non-courtyard side of this building are incorporated into that circulation system. And it creates this really interesting, we think, patchwork of open and closed spaces that, again, adds articulation to the building. Every unit has storage on the front. Every unit has storage along the stair side. And on the stair side, those areas are big enough for people to put their bicycles. So we think we're meeting the bicycle storage requirement there, although it wasn't really highlighted in our document. And as you rotate around this building and site, you can see that the larger building has the same set of architectural principles that provide articulation, the same series of gable forms. And then overall, this shape, I think, is best demonstrated from this view, where the building captures the end of the open area of the field of the existing Base Camp Plaza and offers these units views and access to natural light. So I'm going to keep rotating around this. This is kind of the I-70 side of the building. Here is the other pool of parking. And there was a question about noise. One of the ways in which we're mitigating noise for the residents, which I know isn't necessarily like interest of the planning commission, but how is this considered, is these storage lockers at the backs of those units actually create a buffer. So there's a corridor behind them. There's storage lockers. We will make sure that we're doing whatever we can to soundproof the walls that face I-70 and make sure that the glazing on those windows also meets the criteria that we have for ourselves, that we're going to hold the standard to help the residents make sure that they have pleasant and a pleasant living environment. I'm just going to kind of float around here. You're getting another view of the green space. And again, we're just going to kind of get back down at ground level, because we really think that this is kind of the overall character that people will really relate to at pedestrian or vehicular height. And as the model populates here, you can kind of see, we have a variety of materials. We've demonstrated that in the packet. We can show you exactly what those are. We're trying to be sensitive with a color scheme that meets your chromatic criteria, as well as be reflective of the overall design ideas that are already present in the community. Really are proud of and believe that this will be an asset to the overall composition. So we're hoping to receive your approval ultimately on the conditional use request. I'm a strong believer that this is a good location for additional residential units. This site is underutilized and it's an infill site, and you can see the many ways in which it demonstrates this synergistic opportunity. And then we also believe that the buildings meet the intent of the building articulation standards. And that is for them to be compatible with the surrounding context. And we can talk more about some of the aspects of that with you if you're interested. But we are strong believers that there is the appropriate amount of articulation on these buildings that lets them be compatible with the rest of the adjacent development. Thank you. If you guys have any questions, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Commissioner, questions of the applicant, Robert? We'll start. No, you want to start on the other side? Okay, Patrick.
These are gonna be in no particular order. You hear me this time, I hope. Yes,
Ronnie, can you hear Patrick?
Kind of.
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks,
All right.
Patrick.
Anyway, can you please talk about don't move the screen. Can you talk about the driveway with the blue car on it to the left that appears to be bridge-like and the safety considerations for cars in our snow-bound environment, staying on that, not falling off into the pond?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, this image, there's some work that needs to be done here. I'm just going to say is because there's some detention requirements that we're still working out, right? Like we're at the preliminary level. And I believe that it's likely that this detention area that exists that you guys might be familiar with, the shape of that will likely need to be modified to provide some of the detention that the proposed property will require. And in that process, there's a good chance that we're going to modify what's happening over on this corner of the property. We've also looked at this very edge condition that you're talking about here, and we are contemplating, although we aren't sure yet, whether or not if we have an architectural feature that's a pedestrian bridge, either in this location or in an alternate location, which by the way, we're contemplating and putting it a little further to the north and east for functional purposes, that we might also animate this if it ends up having some topographic change there with similar kinds of railing detailing that could help buffer that.
Protected.
Did you look at alternative resident access to the huge long facade along I-70? Because I'll save my comments. Did you have another option that you explored?
Could you ask that again? Did we look at an option?
Did you explore different resident access other than along I-70 on that long facade?
Well, we did. I mean, there's a couple, that's a really good question. So yeah, we spent some time on this. I'm gonna just point out, like, not to belabor this, but at one point we had the building up against the frontage here, and we thought it was, you know, a way to bring the building closer to the road and put all the parking in a different location, and to create a little bit of a buffer. And, you know, it created a little bit more of a front and back. We really felt like putting the park in the front of this was a real wonderful gesture for the residents and the general public. That being said, what we didn't want to do was create another motel. And, you know, the motel typology often has the corridor circulation at the front on both levels. And what we find is the problem with having circulation at the green court side is that it makes the space unusable. And so, you know, everybody would be walking across one another's porch to get to, you know, their units, making it less of a like private amenity that actually gets used. So we did contemplate it, but if you have a thought there that, you know, could influence this, we'd love to hear it.
Okay, and my last question is the 2 units on the long bar that are in the crook of the L
Yes.
against the other building. Can you talk about their view to see anything or
Yeah.
right to light?
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, I know that's so great that you're thinking about this too. So we actually, you know, got in this model and placed ourselves on these porches, and I could try to do it. It's going to be a little wonky, but these units here don't really get the opportunity to view that way, but what they get are views this way. And we went on Google Earth, and as you know, there's mountain views everywhere. So these 2 end units really have great access to views and light that are kind of, broadside of this building. We also dropped a character on the porch of this unit. And while it's tucked back in there, that unit still gets pretty good views. And views aren't the only thing, views and light through the courtyard. We kind of felt like the darkest unit of them all, as you might imagine, is this guy down on the lower level. But we didn't want to connect the buildings. We wanted to make a corridor that was meaningful for pedestrians. So we felt that, there might be one unit that is the least favorable unit, but that these other units are still of high quality.
No more questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Ira?
Yes. So I appreciate your coming forth with this. A couple of questions. So you can hear me, right? My microphone's better?
Yep, now that you're close to it, we can.
So the first question, those solar panels, is that artistic license of something that could be, or is that a reality?
Well, it's both real and a possibility. Like, I wonder if you're asking, like, are we going to put solar panels on today or not? We don't know.
That would be a very simple question, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what we've done is we've designed these roofs to be able to handle photovoltaic. And you have an aspect of your code, which I could like really get into, and I would love to do this with you at some point. That really make it challenging because your code requires for new construction to be net zero ready. And I mean, I feel like I could talk about this. You can, if you want to, I can get in greater detail about this, but I'm just going to say in order to be net zero ready based on the way in which your building department, planning department interpret that, there needs to be, in general, adequate roof space to, at a future point, to be ready for offsetting the energy use on site. And so right now, we need to make sure that we have enough roof space to do that. I don't think these buildings are technically going to be required to have them today. And we haven't made a determination if we're going to put PV on it. But ultimately that conversation will come at a point in which we start to design the utilities and heating system primarily for the units. So I'm going to just say, like, I don't have an answer for you, but I do know that we do need to commit to having roof space to do it. And we're strong believers that being net zero ready is a good thing to do.
Okay. So I also heard you start to talk about utilities and heating units. Is it your vision that this will have central heating for the entire structures, or would there be individual heatings for the dwelling units?
We think that we will have individual heating systems for each unit.
Okay. I do also like the way you took the back of the building and can see that the storage and everything in the back will add for some soundproofing. I would also add that there's clearly insulation that could go into those wall cavities that will absolutely guarantee soundproofing from I-70. Something you may want to look at.
That's a good suggestion.
And there'd be no architecture there at all. It would just be silent design for a silent outcome.
That's a great suggestion. Yeah, we're going to do the best we can to mitigate that. And I think that what you're describing is a really good approach to it. You can see we've tried to limit, I mean, we want to get the windows where we can, right? But you can see that the windows that are at the non-green side of the buildings are much smaller than the windows that are on the green side. And, you know, that's a part of the ways in which we're trying to mitigate that sound. But I think what you're saying is very valuable. Thank you.
Yeah. So in the overall, I think the use of that infill is commendable. I on that point, which I think is part of our conversation today.
Questions only.
We're just
Questions
on
only.
questions.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
No? Okay. Should I go to Andy?
There you go.
Okay. Robert?
Is the plan to keep this property as a single property?
Yes, that is the plan.
And is the plan to condominiumize these units? Is the plan to rent these units? Is the plan to sell these units? Are there going to be workforce housing units? I mean, we're being asked to make a conditional use permit that doesn't really meet, it meets the code, but only if we agree that it meets the code. And only if we believe it's a benefit to the community. So I haven't heard anything about workforce housing, and workforce housing is desperate. You show pictures on the screen of a father with 2 kids, and but yet all of these are 1-bedroom or studio units. And I'm not sure how you're getting all these kids into these units, but I'd like to hear more about what you're planning on doing with this, what I consider a high density of units in this piece of property.
Yeah, I think Michael Marchand might be the best to respond to this.
Yeah, thanks, Ronnie. And thank you for the question. We certainly recognize the need for locals housing, and as well as the need for new housing inventory in general. And if you're familiar with the past projects that I mentioned in my introduction, you know that over the last couple of decades, Bryn Gray has built over 300 deed restricted homes, and our belief more than proving our commitment to locals housing. We're remaining vigilant to those opportunities that may present themselves, and intend to give locals priority on these units. And we will also be restricting short-term rentals, but we're not making any further commitments at this time.
Say more about restricting for short-term rentals.
It's our intent to prohibit short-term rentals, nightly rentals of these units.
And
But
Andy,
but not necessarily add to the local population if others from the Denver area choose to buy. So we aren't necessarily, with this increased density and with this conditional use permit, we are really getting nothing for our community in terms of workforce housing.
Our intent would be to give locals priority of the units at their initial sale, prior to opening it up to the general market. And yes, that was going to be the second part of the question that I answered, is that we have not, again, made any firm decisions on rental versus for sale, but we are leaning more towards offering these units as a for purchase option.
Are any of these units going to be accessible ready?
yes, they will. We will definitely make sure we meet those requirements. I already know that there's opportunity. I'm just gonna kind of float around to the side, Andy's, that the ramp that will be required to get into the lower level units is going to be provided on this corner of this site, if this were to move forward as is. And the ADA parking stalls are also over on this corner. So I believe that the ADA unit will be at this corner. And then again, similar to the Centura project, which we reviewed with you, all of the ground floor units will be type B units.
Would you be willing to put a sidewalk in on the south side of the street in front of your complex and the Alpine Inn to make for better pedestrian access in what I consider a fairly intense corridor? And I ride my bike in there a lot. And I'm thrilled to hear you might be moving that walkway, because where you have the sidewalk, I don't think is a very safe place.
Yeah,
we agree.
We agree. That's really great. So our team, since staff's report and since the submittal has gotten together, and we've got a really strong team here. So our civil engineer and our landscape designers are on this call as well. And we have the same thought, Andy. I mean, what we're planning, what we would like to do, and to improve this, and this 3D model doesn't totally demonstrate it, but what we'd like to do is extend the sidewalk that is kind of on the north side of Lusher Court across all the way to the entrance to this parking area. And then what we're contemplating doing is extending one of these internal sidewalks and crossing the detention area at a location that's not right in the middle. That'll let us still make it interesting. It'll still look something similar to this, but it'll be easier to maintain so that there's like year-round pedestrian access across it. And so, I mean, I'm not sure if that satisfies what you're thinking, but we were thinking that that would help create greater connectivity that just kind of loops around the leading edge of the property, having a year-round access that's direct access that kind of crosses the detention area, have it look something similar to this. And then, you know, I think it was Patrick that asked earlier, you know, having another architectural feature maybe on this side that helps to, if needed, create that buffer so that it's fall proof.
And speaking of buffering, you mentioned buffering. I totally agree with all of the comments about buffering the view of the parking lots. And this landscaping is representation only. Our landscape architect has done a much better job. But we're not seeing it here yet. So.
Yeah, we're gonna get there with you. We're gonna make sure we conceal those cars the best that we can and meet the requirement. And you know, it's our desire to make this a wonderful place as well. I mean, we've got a lot invested in this.
Since you're getting the benefit of the acreage from the Alpine Inn, wouldn't it be appropriate for you to put a sidewalk in front of the Alpine Inn also, not just in front of your in front of this particular building?
That is something we could talk about. You know, we were not planning on doing that. The access points, and again, this image isn't the best to look at, but you know, there are some questions about what do you do when you get over here? You know, the circulation on Lusher Court is on the south side of Lusher Court, and the amenities that are kind of area amenities, we could probably pull that PDF up again, which shows kind of the connection in the pedestrian trails. They all kind of link through the site and, you know, towards the south. Yeah, that come along Base Camp Way and go to the transit center, and then, you know, the open space system. So the existing sidewalk on the south side of Lusher Court is starting to do that. Maybe there's a connection issue to the trail system right here. I'm not sure if that's what Don was talking about. But it was our intention to, again, you know, create a sidewalk that connects from here to here, to use the existing crosswalk, because at one point we talked about having crosswalk here and it was creating conflicts and
swale.
Yeah, we were encouraged not to. And now looking at it, it's like, why would you do that? So we're thinking concentrate the crossing where it's the safest, and then use the existing infrastructure to kind of get south and east through the community.
I'll save my comments for the end, but I think that I think that it's short-sighted not to think about the east edge of the whole property also. And I think I'm done.
No more questions? Okay. Andy, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that I was curious about has been covered, but I do still have one outstanding question, and that's the stair towers on the, I guess we're calling it the north side of the long building, to get to those upper floor units. If you can spin around the back of the building there for a second. It seems like you've got this really narrow access to those stair towers. So every single person that has an upstairs unit has to walk between the storage locker and those first floor units to get to the stairs to the top. You see how that each of the staircases is set in from the corners of the building. So you have to actually walk through the corridor to even get to them. Like there, you can kind of see that entrance down there, right there.
4-foot corridor.
Yeah, did you think about bringing people to the stair towers around the outside of that storage somehow? Because it just feels like, you know, I moved a lot when I was living in units this size, and moving a couch through there and getting all your furniture through there and just every day having to walk between someone's storage locker and their front door seems Seems like
Right.
you're asking a lot. Maybe there's a different way to get to those stairs. Maybe move them towards the outside of the building or get some access around the outside so you don't have to walk. Looking at it on the floor plan, it seems even tighter. But I was just curious if you had looked at that and if you had any thoughts on making sure that those stair towers are easily accessible for all those upstairs units.
No, that's really great. We did look at that actually. There was a point in which we had a stair tower on this end. We honestly didn't think it improved the access to, the corridor. We do think this is the right place for the corridor, but we didn't think having the stair tower did. And, I know you're looking at the plans, but in this model is a model, but like there's a 4-inch corridor or 4-foot corridor, and then there's a 3.5-foot closet space. So there are times when you're getting over 7 feet of clearance, and that's one of the benefits of this undulating. I mean, yes, it's doing wonderful things in terms of providing storage, also giving some open, giving the articulation to the building, but we're hoping that it breaks up the monotony for the user. And Andy, your question, again, like it's really spot on. We really felt that putting a stair on the green court side of this was essential.
No, that's a great stair. I just question the access to those 2 back stairs that kind of make you walk between somebody's storage locker and their front door. It seems a little tight, but I agree. But nobody that's parking their car is using that stair that you're pointing at, right? If you're parking your car and you're moving into your unit upstairs, you're coming through that back staircase and you're walking right through between somebody's storage locker and their front door. So the back seemed a little funky to me to make somebody walk through that hallway just to get to the stair even. I was just curious if you had looked at any other options there. That's the only question I have. I'll save the rest for comments.
Okay, great. What questions did I have for the applicant? A lot of your argument for the conditional use is around language like much needed housing in Frisco and a reference to a housing shortage. And the much needed housing that we need is affordable housing, workforce housing, senior housing. So I don't even know why you're using that language. As you said, you're the one that's been developing all this workforce housing all over, and clearly not committing to making this the product and using it as an argument for your conditional use. So I guess that's not a question, but I guess I'm curious why you're using that type of language when you're not proposing the type of housing that we're really looking for.
Okay, that's a really good question. So, well, first of all, my understanding is that the conditional use, and Don can jump in and talk about this, isn't what you're not required to provide affordable housing. That's not a conditional use.
Well, you're required to make an argument that you're benefiting the community. And your argument is that you're providing housing that is needed.
Yep, that is one of the aspects. But also, so that's just one, like that. I don't think that is actually a checkbox criteria. But again, bringing any housing to your community, I think, is valuable. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, and that's not the case. But I'll also say the units that we've designed here, outside of any deed restriction that may or may not be placed on a unit, are intentionally compact. They're 350 to 525 square feet. These are not 1,500 square foot units. And while I'm not in charge of this decision, but while there isn't an AMI aspect that is capping the qualifications, there is an inherent piece of the design that does reduce the unit size and consequently reduce the cost to purchase them if they do go to market. So, I wish I could say that every project that we did was just bringing affordable units to the market, because we have that problem here too, and we do a lot of affordable housing projects, but kind of in the light of circumstances and what this project is, we think that housing at this location is a good thing. We think that compact housing and putting 30 more units in a location that have access to these amenities gives people an opportunity to get out of their car and reduce the carbon footprints, is meeting other goals and objectives. And again, we think that the design is sensitive in meeting that balance that's described in the conditional use criteria.
Okay. Can I ask you another question? The white or gray or whatever that color is it white or is it gray? Because it looks gray in some renderings and it looks really white in others, like that one.
I don't know if I just flipped to a PDF. I don't know if you guys.
Yes, yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so this is in your material and it's hard to get the colors just to match right, but these are real colors. And these are what we're proposing. And so the color that's B here, the one that's B, is the same one that's on the building. So it's not a true white. We think it meets your chromatic color requirements that are embedded in your code. And on the next round, what we are required to do, and we have it here actually, is we're going to send you a physical sample of all this so you could look at that.
Okay, so it's more like a beige.
Yeah,
It's a warm gray,
Warm gray. Okay.
off-white.
Ronnie, so sorry, you're the same architect of the Centura project, right?
Yeah, I mean, our team is, so Tom is here with me and.
But you're
yeah.
the architect.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, because this looks a lot to me like that development. So I guess that might also just be a comment, but okay, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, we'd love to talk to you about that if you'd like. I see Andrew's
Sure.
got it up. I bet he's got a similar topic to talk about.
And Andy, I think you have another question.
Yeah, only if you're done, Lena.
I'm done.
Okay, just a quick sort of some background. I know we have very similar micro units on the other side of the base camp. Can you tell us really quick what is going on with those units right now? Who's in those units? Are they owned? Are they rented? Are they locals? What's going on over there? Because we're probably looking at a very similar client base for these units, right?
The base camp residence is a total of 25 units. 20 of those are deed restricted and 5 of those are market rate.
Okay.
They are all occupied.
Okay, so the deed restriction on that kept those as locals for the most part. Who owns the market rate units? Are they locals or are they in any way, are they renting those out? Can they rent those out? Do you know what's going on with those market rate units?
I do not know who is in those market rate units at the time right now. It's 50-50.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Lena. Had to step away for a moment. Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, we will move to public comment. And I'm hopeful we'll be able to see who's on and who has potential public comment. If you want to make a public comment, please identify yourself with your address and your name for the record and your interest in the application. And please address the Planning Commission, not the applicant. And all statements should be brief, 3 minutes or less, and non-repetitious. So.
And one other comment, if you're on the Zoom, please use the raise your hand function so that way we can see you and recognize you.
Seeing no public comment, I will close this section of this item and move on to commissioner comments. I would suggest we might take a short break, a moment till Lena returns.
Oh,
Here she is. Okay. I just wanted her to be in the room when we started public comments. Andy, why don't you start with your public or your commissioner comments?
Okay.
Then I'll hand it all back to Lena.
Great. Well, there's a lot on those questions, so I'll just kind of start the discussion and maybe we'll come back around at some point. But I think it all hinges on the conditional use, or at least it starts there. I agree. I think this is a great spot for residential. I think we've got a lot of commercial going on there. I think this just kind of further revitalizes or invigorates that whole area. So I'm not opposed to the conditional use. I definitely hear what fellow commissioners are saying, and I wonder if some sort of a condition of approval for that use would be that, I know we heard the idea that they're planning to have no short-term rentals. Maybe we could discuss making that an actual condition of that conditional use, that it's written in, that they agree that there would never be short-term rentals in there. I also agree with the applicant, the size of these units, that's why I asked who's in the other units. I think it really does limit the market. I don't know who else wants, this isn't really necessarily ideal short-term rentals even. Just because you can't fit a lot of people in these places. And so I think the nature of the product does limit who wants to live there. And so I don't know that I necessarily need to see deed restriction or would feel that's necessary, but I would like to see that these don't just become a whole bunch of short-term rentals. So maybe we can discuss that. As far as, let's see, what else have we got here? As far as the building articulation, I agree with staff. I don't think the building currently meets the building articulation standards. I know, I appreciate the using the storage lockers on the interstate side as a sound buffer. I think that's going to really help. I know that interstate was probably a big early design consideration in how you treat that. And I think that's an interesting solution, but I don't know that it necessarily breaks up the elevations in the way that we're hoping, or that the intent of the code states. We still have building walls and foundation walls that are very long and very linear. Certainly, as you get to that third floor, we lose the articulation altogether. I don't see any articulation on the third floor at all. And I think that standard needs to apply to the whole building, not just the first floor. Also, as far as the ridgeline issues, I also agree with staff. I think we need to make sure that we don't get over 66% of a building length with a ridge line. But I also want to point out that the code talks about roof line, not just ridge line. And it talks about roof line being at the same elevation for more than 66% of the building. When I see those shed roofs strung out across all sides of these buildings and they're all at the exact same elevation, to me, that's a roof line that's 100% of the length of that building at the same elevation. I think we have to see, same as we talked about, Ronnie, over at Centura, we've got to break those shed roofs up somehow, whether we introduce some small gables in there, whether we change the height of those sheds to some degree. It's just too monotonous. And certainly on the interstate side, which is definitely going to be visible, this is what people are going to see of our town. They're going to see the back of this building as they go by and as they're coming to the town. And I'd really like to see those shed roofs broken up a lot more than they are right now. I also want to point out on those shed roofs on the front side, they're all shedding. I know the ground floor units all have doors off the rear access, but they also all have sidewalks going out into the courtyard, and every one of them is just going to get covered with snow from those shed roofs. So I think we need to see something. The code does recommend that we stay away from roofs that shed over walkways and access points. And I think those shed roofs are exactly what we're talking about with there, because every one of those access points to the ground floor units off the courtyard is going to get covered in snow. As far as the colors, I think the colors, we'll get there. We'll take a look at the final color selection, but I don't have any problems right now with the directions you're going. Landscape buffer, I'm okay with the parking arranged the way it is. I think it's nice, but I do agree with staff that we'd like to see those parking spaces screened a little bit better. And I know that Norris will do a great job. Can't wait to see their designs for that. But I definitely agree with staff. Right now, we need to see a little bit more there. Let me see here. I think that should be a good kickoff to the conversation. Why don't I send it on down the line and see if anything else comes up that I need to weigh on, I'll let you know. But
Thanks,
thank you.
Sam.
I agree. I think this is a great project. We definitely need to dial it in just a little bit though. Thanks.
Thank you. Robert?
I probably struggle a little bit more with the conditional use if we don't get, and I don't totally agree with Andy. I think that we should get some workforce housing out of this, some restricted units. I know that it's more likely that people will buy these units who might be of lower incomes, but I can also see these units going pretty fast for someone who lives in Denver who wants to have a weekend place and wants to just come up here to ski and overpack their unit with their two kids that are walking down in your green space. So I want to see more if we're going to get that. I do agree that I appreciate the short-term rental restriction, and I'd like to see that as part of any conditional use. And I'd hope that we can come up with something where some of those units are deed restricted. Because otherwise I find the density of this unit with the two buildings, it feels busy and awkward to me. And if we were getting something for that, I'd feel better about it. I definitely believe that a sidewalk needs to go in on the north side of the street that covers not only the front of this building, but the front of the Alpine Inn, since this is one property. And from the east edge of the Alpine Inn, there's a really natural connection across. A crosswalk could go in and it would then connect with the sidewalk that is going down. What is that road? Not Lesher, Meadow Creek. And that connection would be really natural. And also one going across in a place that isn't right across from where people whipping out of outer range are making a right turn onto Lesher Court. I think that would be a dangerous place to put a crosswalk because unfortunately, I think there's people who aren't totally sober when they're coming out of there. As much as I like outer range. I would agree with Andy about the building articulation standards. I don't need to repeat that. Also with the roof line, I just wrote it as roof, not ridge line. And also with the parking screens. I find I like the concept of doing something in this property, and I even like the argument about the views. I find the buildings to be a little less exciting than I would hope that we would build. I think that there's some excitement in how you built some of the rest of base camp, but I just find this to be a little less inspired and maybe too close to what we approved, which was essentially, even though it wasn't workforce housing, for the hospital. So I'm hopeful that what I see next will change some of that significantly.
Thank you, Robert. Ira?
Sure, thank you. I'm in a position where I can be redundant or not. So I'm going to choose not to be redundant because a lot of the points that have been made, I think articulation is going to be a big conversation and design point that will need to be addressed on a lot of different levels. In terms of, the sidewalks and the protection of the pedestrian and bicycles, I think that sorely needs to be addressed. Overall, having a residential component in there already is a residential component, and I think the use of this infill lot for residents is very good in my book, so I'm supporting that 100%. But I know the conversation went a little bit into the needs of the town of Frisco in terms of housing. And to that extent, my wish list is that this remain rental housing. and, long-term rental housing. And that, to me, addresses a lot of needs where people don't have to come up with the ability to get a mortgage, with a big down payment, with a lifetime commitment or, multi-year commitment to live somewhere. And I, in my humble opinion, think that long-term rentals is what our community really needs to support a work community. And to that extent, this residence being proposed, just in the overall, that's not a residential community. And that's okay with me. And I'm fine with that. But I don't see long-term residents really living there. I see what Robert says, and I agree that people will come from elsewhere to populate it on a part-time basis. And even if it's not rented short-term, I just don't see it being developed as a long-term residence area. That's why I think the rental usage of that building, because there's so many jobs right in that area that need support, and just jobs overall on the Highway 9 corridor. It's a work mecca, which needs workforce support. And so that's my wish list, is that we could somehow see this become rental housing.
Okay, thank you, Patrick.
Thanks. Let's see. First off, I just want to commend the staff report and the thoroughness of it. I think it was really, really spot on, and it nailed everything that I think most of us are talking about from a concerns point of view. My biggest few hangups are, when you look at the elevations, and it's clear in the model, there's a type A building and there's a type B building, and they're just stamped out 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or 2, 4, 6, 2, 4, 6, whatever it is. But anyway, you can see that from the way they're put together, and that leads to some of the challenges that we're all acknowledging. I think that the design in total is not as dynamic as it could be. I feel a little bit like it's advantageous to the developer to see how far we can go. When I compare it to the other base camp units, I don't think it's at the same bar. And that's what I've heard it being compared to. So I'd like to see the architecture raised to that standard at least. And then, of course, the variety in the roof planes and the ins and outs of the architecture, a little more conformance, or a lot more actually, to the Unified Development Code as stated. And then I think the last thing that hasn't really been mentioned, I am definitely adverse to the off-white tone. To me, it looks fleshy. I don't think using the Summit Inn or whatever that thing is now, that's been just recently repainted as a precedent, flies in my book at all. I was really disappointed to see that much bright white in our neighborhood. I think we try and stay clear of that deliberately. So I would strongly recommend a medium tone at least. And that to me is not a medium tone, despite what the Munford color scale says that it is. Put it on a building here in our bright sun, that's a different conversation. So anyway, that's all for me. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I guess I am just going to echo everyone's comments. I fully agree with staff on providing additional landscaping screening for the parking area. I definitely don't think that you are meeting the code today in terms of architecture, building articulation, and roof line articulation. And I agree with, who was it, Andy, maybe, about the shed roofs. We made that same comment with Centura, that we wanted those broken up. And so I think that applies here as well. And while I brought that up, I just feel like this looks a lot like the Centura development. It reminds me exactly of it. And so, and I don't have it before me. I'm sure there are differences, but it looks a lot like it. And I kind of wish that we would get something more unique in this location. I also know a couple people that live in the base camp condos there, and I think they complain a lot about the Summit Stage, the transfer center being loud. And this one will have I-70 on top of it. So I just hope that you do some additional noise analysis and make sure that you're doing whatever you can to mitigate those noise issues. And it'd be great, I don't know if this is a thing, but if you could, do a noise mitigation study as part of the final submittal. And then in terms of the conditional use, I'm not fully opposed to residential in this location, but it is our gateway district. And part of me sort of agrees with Ira on, I think rentals are more appropriate in the gateway district. And as a conditional use, I really feel that, and especially coming from your team, I really feel that there should be some workforce housing, a workforce housing component as part of this project. I mean, especially given it even shares a site with the Alpine Inn, yeah, where the county has had to master lease some workforce housing, and it's been, it has a long wait list. So the demand is definitely there. You're using that argument to support your conditional use permit, and yet you're not backing it up with actually providing some workforce housing or any of the other types of needed housing in the county. So those are my comments. I hope that, you take it to heart and we see something that we all agree upon a little bit more when you come in at final. And otherwise, good luck.
Lena, can I say one more thing? I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. Go for it.
I just wanted to mention the end elevations of the buildings that face Lusher Court with it. I guess it would be the kind of the west elevation of the long building and the south elevation of the smaller building. As we were looking at those, I just want to make sure that I think we can do better on those elevations too. We kept talking about the long elevations and the building articulation, and we don't necessarily have articulation issues on those short ends, but those are going to be highly visible coming down I-70 and driving along Lusher Court. And I would like to see more attention paid to just a 3-story wall that just has a few windows in it. I think we can do better there. So I just wanted to bring that up. And I also wonder, Lena, you referenced final, seeing this at the final. But personally, for me, I feel like the articulation is so far off and the roof lines are so far off. I wouldn't mind seeing this again at a second sketch plan, because I think there needs to be some substantial changes between now and when they actually start getting into the nitty gritty. And so I wouldn't mind seeing it again before we tell them to go to final. I would be curious to hear what the rest of the commissioners have to say about that.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
And I'm not comfortable enough with what you've proposed so that I would approve a conditional use at this point. So I'd really like to see it again, even for that, as well as the articulation standards and some of the other comments that you heard from commissioners before we put you through the process of bringing you in for a final and then not even approving your conditional use permit. So I would hope that we'll see this again in this stage.
In a sketch plan. And I would like to go back because I forgot to make a comment about the pedestrian connectivity. I agree with the other commissioners that have said we need additional pedestrian connectivity. And I don't think it's a bad idea to connect that north side even through Alpine Inn, like Robert said. So I think it would help your argument also for compatibility if you really up that pedestrian connectivity and just ramp it up. I like your little bridge that you're doing. I like your little plaza area in front, but I do think that pedestrian connectivity is short and it needs to be improved. So how do you feel about, I don't know, Don, about what do we do about sketch versus final?
Yeah, I'll have to look at the exact code language. I think I would say that the planning commission has given pretty solid feedback that the applicant may be advised to just resubmit a new sketch plan. As far as whether it can be required or not, I'll have to pull code, double check the language. Susan's pulling the code. She's got her computer. Magic box.
Sorry, it might take a second.
Actually, I do have it here in the staff report. It says the planning commission may require an applicant to return for additional sketch plan presentation if sufficient information is not received or if substantial changes to a proposal are recommended. Presentation of a sketch plan neither binds nor anything else. So according to that language, which is 180-2.5D3B, the planning commission can require. So I guess that would be maybe a discussion. It sounds like
Vote then that we require it.
I think you probably should at least take a poll of each other. It's not a formal vote because there's no formal action taken. But I think certainly if a majority of the planning commission says, yes, another sketch plan is needed, I would say that qualifies as a planning commission requiring a new sketch plan submittal.
Okay, so we have Andy, we have Robert, we have everybody.
Sounds like it's that a new sketch plan is going to be required.
Are we done?
No,
Oh.
he was requesting a 3-minute break before the next application.
We're gonna take a little break.
Yeah.
Right after this,
I
so.
need to stand if nothing else.
Yep. So I think I think we have direction at least for the applicant as well from there and conclude. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
A 3-minute break.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, Don.
Thank you. Okay, we are now going to move on. We're now going to move on to planning file number MAJ 210008, a public hearing on a major site plan application for a proposed new multipurpose recreation building in the Parks and Recreation Zone District at 605 Recreation Way. Don,
Yes.
the floor is yours.
Thanks. Good evening, planning commissioners. So this application is a major site plan submittal for MAJ 21-008, which is a new multipurpose recreation building out at the PRA. You did see a sketch plan earlier on this, and so that means a lot of the information has already been addressed, but I'll go through a quick summary of this, highlighting maybe some key points that the planning commission needs to give some feedback or make a finding upon. So this, start off here. Okay, so in 2020, the town of Frisco adopted the new Parks and Recreation Master Plan for the PRA. The PRA plan created a prioritized implementation schedule for future construction projects for the ultimate build out of the site. That includes the primary and biggest focus of that initial one is this building, which was identified in the PRA master plan as the village center. Over design iterations and town council considerations, since the town is the actual owner and applicant of this, that design has been modified from the original master plan view of a 20,000 square foot building to what you see today, which is about a 7,600 square foot building. This is not actually adding additional uses or new uses to the PRA. This is going to be essentially repurposing and creating additional space for the existing programs that are out there, moving offices out of the basement of the existing day lodge and into this new building. So during the sketch plan hearing in October of 2021, Planning Commission identified a number of key concerns. First of all, there is a support for the administrative adjustment for a west facade for articulation purposes. Another comment was that the proposed height is no longer an issue as long as it remains under 35 feet. Materials look good, but need some more definition on the elements. There was a lot of discussion at the sketch plan meeting about parking, and we'll touch on that a little bit more in a minute. And there was also support at the end of finding that it did meet the community plan at that point in time. Following that planning commission sketch plan review, the next step was to take it to town council. Again, as the project owner, they had wanted to make sure they had a good update on the design and how that was proceeding. Planning commission, or I'm sorry, the applicant or the design team met with town council in December of 2021 and gathered some feedback that while the planning commission and they understood the planning commission's concern about parking, that parking was not to be implemented at this point in time because this new building is not creating additional use which require additional parking. There are spaces in the master plan that will allow for additional parking in the future. And again, we'll touch on that a little bit later. So there is one other thing that came out of it from Planning Commission that you have not seen, but you will see in the future. And that is design of an existing community plaza between this property as well as the day lodge. That has now been authorized by town council under a separate contract and will come back to Planning Commission for review when that is ready. So if you do have some concerns or comments on how the two blend together, that is going to be addressed at a later time. So moving forward, we're touching on a few things. So this is located in the Parks and Recreation District. In the PR district, the maximum height is 25 feet. However, the Planning Commission can okay a height up to 35 feet if it meets a couple of criteria. One is that substantial architectural relief is provided, and second, that the additional height allowance provides a recreational amenity that is unique and desired in Frisco and is supported by the master plan. Again, during the sketch plan hearing, I think there was some support for that from Planning Commission, but as part of this, you will need to make a finding if you still agree with that, that standard is being met with to allow that exception. The next comment is about parking. Again, that was a big discussion at the sketch plan phase. Town council indicated no additional parking There was some questions about the location of an accessible parking space. That was, the applicant did address that and added a new space along Recreation Way to make that, make it a little bit closer to the new building. And then future parking will be part of the master plan implementation overall. As you can see here, the existing parking at the PRA is about 112 spaces centered just to the, I guess that'd be the north and west of the Day Lodge. As part of the master plan implementation, there's about another 136 spaces planned throughout the PRA area. Development standards and compatibility, that's the next key step. And the main issue with this is, I guess there's two. One is the building articulation on the west facade. So the west facade has a wall section that's greater than 37 feet in length, as shown here, which does not meet that standard. There is an allowance in the code for an administrative adjustment to that articulation standard, as long as that, as the planning commission makes a finding that it is appropriate. The planning commission did indicate initial support at that sketch plan. So again, if the planning commission feels that the criteria and the standard is being met for that administrative adjustment, you'll need to make that finding as part of any motion on this. Next piece that I want to address is actually the recommended standards, recommended findings. Again, I'm not going to read through all these. They are detailed in staff report, but short summary is that there is general conformance with the community plan. And there is general conformance with zoning regulations, specifically the Parks and Recreation District, specifically with respect to building height. The Planning Commission finds that additional height provides substantial architectural relief and advances the intent of this section. General conformance with other development standards, parking, loading regulations, landscaping regulations. And then finally, the sixth finding is also something that's necessary related to the articulation. Specifically with respect to building articulation, the Planning Commission finds that the administrative adjustment to the building articulation standard accommodates an alternative or innovative design practice that achieves the same or better degree the objective of the standard of that section. So with that, staff does have a recommended condition to apply, and this is to satisfy some comments of Summit Fire and EMS, Building Department and Town Engineer. Summit Fire and EMS was related to fire access. Town Building Department identified that there's a second egress or a second entry or egress required from the upstairs. And then finally, the Town Engineer had some comments about some drainage. So with that, staff has a suggested motion to approve with that one condition. And with that, I can take any questions that you may have on this.
Great, thanks, Don. Any questions for Don? Robert?
Yeah. We continue to talk about no new programs are being added because of this building. But that critical word is because. Are there new programs going to happen in the Day Lodge? I mean, because that would be an addition of programs over what we're doing between the two buildings.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great question for Diane McBride, who's the assistant interim town manager and also oversees recreation and culture and is representing the applicant this evening.
Second question, and I may just have my head screwed up because I've seen a lot of different plans for different things. Wasn't there around a circle drive into this place at one point?
There was, the original design at sketch plan, good recollection, did have a, not a full circle drive, but it was a cul-de-sac.
Right.
That didn't really meet a lot of the concerns in some of the design, and it would have required some earth cut and fill as well. So I think as the design further developed, the current design for this hammerhead, which meets fire access concerns, was identified. I think
that's going to be the drop off now.
No.
So people are going to have to come in and then back in and go out again.
Now the drop off is actually going to be still at the existing Day Lodge. And again, I think the applicant may be better suited to explain how the circulation will work from the parking areas to this new location.
I think that's all I had for you. Yeah, and I'll ask the applicant that. That's it.
Thanks, Robert. Andy? Any questions?
No, I was actually curious about that, the drop off and how that all works too, because that looked pretty different. So I'll be curious to hear how we're working through all that. But I don't have any other questions. Thanks.
All right, Ira, any questions for Don?
Yeah, just go back to parking. Is there more parking in the plan? Is there more parking in the plan to be built, or how does that work?
Correct. Yeah, I'll go back to that presentation here real quick. The parking that's shown in the master plan is planned to be built at some point as part of the overall master plan implementation, which is a multiple year thing. At this point in time, and again, planning commission, or I'm sorry, the town council did discuss that at their December meeting about the parking. I think the position that the town council took is it's not necessary for this building. They will observe conditions on the ground and see if additional parking should be implemented at some point in the very near future or not. Their stance is that it's not necessary at this time, and they believe that the current parking will be able to accommodate the new building and the existing uses out there.
Yeah, I mean, as a user out there, for the most part, it's adequate.
Mhm.
But we have a number of high use days when those cars everywhere.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, I think that's a very valid point, and the applicant may be able to address that a little bit further as well.
Thanks, Ira. Patrick, any questions?
No questions for staff.
Questions?
Great.
Thank you.
All right, I will turn this over to set it up for. There you go.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us tonight. So I will try to address some of your questions as well. And just maybe as an overview of this project, in addition to what Don provided, this project's been in the plans for quite some time. We actually started this maybe 3-4 years ago. We knew we had issues with crowding, both for the public, our staff, our programs, a variety of things. And we kind of set out and said, hey, we need a new facility. And so kind of went down that path, and then we paused and said, wait a second, what are we doing, right? We need to have a better plan. So we sought a comprehensive vision plan, and that plan was approved in 2020. Yep. And so with that plan, it was great because this building then was identified as something that was really needed. And we wanted to make sure that we were building the building not only for the uses of today, but for the uses in the future. We wanted to make sure we were addressing all the staffing issues that we were having in terms of currently our staff are in the basement. We needed to have more space for them. We wanted to have space that was going to be flexible in nature. So you could use it for a variety of uses, whether that be for private events, whether that be a pure rentable space, whether that be for more programming. And so this is kind of where we have landed at this point in time. We're very excited about being here today because, as you can only imagine, we're also very excited about this building. To address the question about the no new uses, it's an interesting thing because I get what you're saying, right? Like you're building a brand new building, but what are you doing? We've kind of shifted, if you look at this in terms of the winter uses versus the summer uses. So if I start with the summer aspect of things, right now we run a fun club program that takes place out of the Nordic Center. And then we run all of our sports camps that take place out of the Day Lodge, which means the Day Lodge is in effect, it's just not able to use as private, for private rentals very much. We do some weddings on the weekends. We do a variety of different evening events. But the idea here is to spread that out a little bit and make it so that the Day Lodge is not as, as loved as it is at this point in time. So this new facility will serve as the fun club home, if you will, for all of those programs. We're also expanding the number of users from 50 users to about 70 users for that program. So you will see that increase, but that doesn't necessarily have a huge increase in terms of when the timing and what that looks like in terms of parking and everything else. You'll see some increase there. You will see ideally then some more private rentals of the Day Lodge itself. That facility is absolutely gorgeous. We've done many weddings out there and done a variety of different special events out there. So it does open up that space to be a little bit more rented, if you will. Plus we'll be changing out the kitchen as well to make it more of a catering kitchen so that ideally we will get some more uses, but those are typically in the evenings as well. So will there be some additional volume that will be happening? Of course, but it's also the goal is to spread this out a little bit more. In the wintertime, the Day Lodge will continue to serve as the hub for tubing. So all the tubing guests in the Day Lodge, great space for them to hang out, to wait for their tubing hours, or for guests to hang out there as well. The new facility, the Slopeside Hall, will serve in a variety of different capacities there. It does open up the space then for us to do additional programming, whether that be after-school programming for the kids. I don't know if anyone saw the Summit Daily yesterday, but after-school programming has taken a big hit in the county at this point in time. We know we have capacity where we could do some after-school programming in that facility as well. But the volume isn't necessarily going to be so big that you wouldn't be able, that it would cause so much more of a problem with traffic and parking. The space is also available then for private rental. So while the Day Lodge serves as the Tubing Hill space, that space, the new space, will serve as an ability to rent out for a private event. We do get a lot of those requests in the wintertime, and we typically have to say no to them because we can't handle the public being in the Day Lodge and then a private event being there as well. So you could actually have a private event happen in this new facility, and the Day Lodge operations with the tubing operations still happening at the same time. So I hope that answers your question. There is, of course, you're going to see changes to what that looks like, but not necessarily something that's going to be so impactful that it would lend itself to needing this more parking at this time. And I don't know if you have any more. Sorry, I was looking at my other questions here. The Circle Drive in the back. Yep, these guys, I
Want
think,
to go through your presentation?
Why don't you let David?
David's gonna be taking that on. So sorry. Yes, I was just giving the overview of that and then trying to answer your question as well. Sorry. So
David
yes.
presents, they can ask questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi. Let me get over to this plan here. So this is the landscaping plan. Nothing really has changed. We do have Megan Teston with Norris Design. The only thing that we're really seeing here that's changed is this hammerhead that's been identified. So the person that I would really like to have you talk with about the hammerhead design and how that evolved is Bob McDonald with our office, who's actually online right now. So Bob, if you're able to, could you talk about this sort of evolution of how the hammerhead came about and why we see it in the configuration that we do right now?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. Dave, hi, I'm Bob McDonald, the project architect with OLC. And yeah, originally we had that circular drive back there, and it was intended to be a functional drop-off for patrons to the facility for the public. But because of some of the existing grades on there and the expense and just the sheer size of that and how we're having to really cut into the side of the hill to make that work was getting very expensive. Also, just the traffic along Recreation Way, there were some concerns about stacking and causing some issues out there. So the decision was made to turn that into just strictly a service and emergency access on the backside of the building there. So that's purely for deliveries, trash and recycling pickup, as well as fire department egress to get an apparatus in there to fight a fire.
And this has been through the fire department and has been preliminarily approved by the chief, correct?
Yes, I talked to Kim again just yesterday. Went through this design and he's approved it.
So we had an ADA spot in here at one point, and a lot of this was generated by trying to lower this building. The way that the development code determines building height is from existing grade. So we did push the grade down somewhat to try to get this building lower. And as you'll see, as we go through this presentation, that the building height is going to be about 1.5 feet lower than 35-foot maximum that we have. And that's largely due to us pushing this building down. It's not that the building height is actually lower itself. It's just that in relationship to that grade, it is actually going to be lower. The overall building height itself doesn't really change, if that makes sense. So what the result of that is pushing that eastern end of the site down a little bit more, causing those additional grade changes along the eastern edge, which drove us to this particular configuration. Basically just pushing that whole site down and then making that circular turnaround not very easy to work with from a grading standpoint, to put it in simple terms. And so that's why you see this hammerhead. There was also concerns about, and I think some of the concerns came out of the sketch plan from the planning commission here about allowing individuals to come in here and just sort of the confusion that it may cause as far as access to this drop off. So we pulled that drop off out of the program. And then there's an accessible, Bob, which the accessible parking space is out here, correct?
Yeah, that's right. It's designated along that existing curb cut right there where we've got accessible route.
Right. So this doesn't show it in the landscaping plan, but the site plan does show the ADA accessible space out here. Originally, it was in the turnaround down here. So we're just really trying to restrict that back access to deliveries, emergency, and trash removal. So that's sort of the evolution of that hammerhead. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Moving on to the building plans. The building plans really have not changed at all. I mean, we have no programmatic change in the building plans. The wall articulation on the exterior is the same. This is the first level, still same programmatic components, et cetera. This is the upper level plan. This has not changed either. Mostly offices up there and a break room for the staff and a changing room. This is the roof plan. So as we move through, of course, this is part of the plan, the major plan submittal process is determining of the building height. And these are the existing grades that you see here. We have, from what you saw in the sketch plan, we've actually pushed the building down about 1.5 feet. And that's where you see the actual building height here. There's a building height designation. This high ridge is the high part of the building. So on this western ridge of the building, it's about 33.5 feet. And on the eastern side, it's a little bit less than 33.5 feet. Because on this side, it's actually taken from the finished floor, because the finished floor is higher than the actual existing grades at that point. So this was contained in the submittal. Then working around the building, a few of these may be very subtle changes, but we went through a value engineering process and just, basically trying to whittle away a little bit of, sounds like somebody's getting their teeth drilled outside. We reduced some of the stone on the building. That was one of the things you'll see here. Originally, for example, this whole wall was stone. This whole wall was stone. And we've also changed, just pointing out the changes here. We originally had a standing seam metal roof on this building. And as you can see from the, and feel free to come and look at this, but we originally had standing seam metal, but we have changed to an asphalt shingle now. Very similar in color, is going to look very much the same. Those are really two of the major changes, and we saved some pretty significant money by doing that, just reducing the amount of stone that we had on the building and changing to the asphalt shingles. One of the other things that's happened with this building is that there was significant concern that wasn't previously mentioned about having solar included into this project. And we were given the direction to come up with a net zero building in this case. And we are there with this building right now. And we have shown a lot more solar panels. You may see them on the roof plan here. Actually, the roof plan doesn't show the correct solar array. Basically, when we get to the backside of the building, you'll see the correct solar array. But there's about 78 solar panels on this building. And it's in an effort to reach that net zero target that we were going for. One of the things that's caused us to do, there's no gas-fired units in this building whatsoever. They're all electrical heating units. That's caused us to have to add a lot of condensers outside the building. And basically, a condenser is, if you're not familiar with it, it's similar to like a residential condenser that you'd see outside, but these are commercial grade. And the array is pretty good sized. And as a matter of fact, I'll show you where that array exists here on the first floor plan. It's right here. So these are all the condensers that we've added to reach that net zero target. And they're as a result of the electrical heating units that we're putting inside the building. So we've had to shield those. We want to shield those from the roadway so you don't see those as you're coming down Recreation Way. The reason I'm bringing that up is because they're apparent on the elevations here. So basically what we have done is we've created these little wing walls off the columns and created a shield around those so they're not apparent from Recreation Way. You don't see those condensers, and they're worked into the architectural elements of the building in a very cohesive fashion. And again, the renditions, it's worse on this screen than it is on the big screen, but you can see the materials really have not changed. There was a concern at one point about this element here looking a little church-like. So we've tried to take some of the glass out of that element and try to broaden out the fenestration there on that end piece and make it look a little bit more lodge-like, a little bit more consistent with the rest of the architecture of the building. This is the wing wall on the end, on the east side of the elevation that encases that condensing unit that you saw in the plan view. And then down here, you can see all these solar panels basically facing in the southern direction on the south elevation of the building, pretty much covering every single surface on the south elevation. We really didn't want to go and put those ground mounted out on the site. We really wanted to get as much as we possibly could on that roof to achieve the goal that we were going after. Trying to see here if there was any more concerns as we walk around the building here from the initial meeting. I don't think there were. Oh, in the entry there was, I'm sorry. There was a concern about not having stone on both sides of this entry element. And as you'll see in the elevations, we have done that to make a perfectly symmetrical entrance with having stone flanking both sides of the vestibule. So then moving on, this is that vestibule. This is the wall where we've reduced the stone, reduced the stone here. Not really having a huge or major impact on the overall aesthetics of the building. Again, the forms of the building really have not changed at all. We've had to add this door for egress. We've had to make this stairwell just because of travel distances, egress distances on this from the second level. We've had to rate this stairwell. So we've had to add a door to the outside directly out of that stairwell, not going through the vestibule. Here are the condenser units that I mentioned before. You can see they're well shielded with a cohesive, the siding that we had mentioned in the sketch plan, which is concrete fiber cement siding, and also the stone pilasters that are a continuation of the pilasters across the front of the building or the north side of the building. This is the secondary entrance on the backside, which staff will use, especially to enter this stairwell. They won't enter here, but they will enter here. This is just emergency exiting. So that is the east side of the building. And then you can see the solar arrays from this view. This is the side that faces south and faces kind of over towards the Day Lodge. And you can see all the solar panels. The change to asphalt shingles is apparent in this view. And Actually, we've got some solar panels in this, on this dormer that comes out of the meeting rooms, the multipurpose rooms here, and then on the opposite side as well, just to get to that critical mass that we really need for the solar panels. And that's really kind of the highlights of some of the changes that we've made, some of the improvements that we've made, and how we've addressed some of the concerns that were raised by the commission in the original sketch plan.
I think that's the entirety of the presentation.
Okay, well, now we'll start commissioner comments or questions of the applicant. So Patrick, we'll start with you.
Sure, I've got a few. These are in no particular order, but that last picture we looked at, I was just checking the roof for slopes. What's your proposal for snow guards or prevention? Because there's a lot of slopes that go towards sidewalk areas and some of them straight off of solar panels. Is that just a detail that's not shown in the set?
Yeah, we aren't at that level yet. We'll certainly have snow guards
Cool.
on the lower edges of those roofs.
Um,
The slopes are largely at 4 to 12. There's this higher pitch is actually at 5 to 12.
Okay.
Sorry, I took off so quickly.
No problem. Just hang out for just a second. How about, let's see, when we talk about materials, that's one that unfortunately I didn't have the opportunity to be here for previous presentations, so I'm
Mhm.
taking it in a minute. But could you address how exactly similar this material palette is to the existing building it's adjacent to?
It's similar but different. I would say that the existing building, the Day Lodge, I'm assuming you're talking about the Day Lodge, has got an asphalt shingle roof, but I believe it's got also a piece of Core-10 on it as well. But it has these same exposed wood elements that I think really hold those two buildings contextually together. The siding on it's very different. It's got sort of that false log cabin look with the split side. I don't know exactly what, I'm an architect, I should know this, but it's got that veneer of what looks like log siding on it that's been stained. We have tried to pick up with the color of that, but being a little bit more of a, I wouldn't call it a very modern looking building, but a predictable looking mountain building. We wanted to be compatible with that colorization, but not be exactly the same. The colors of the roofs are similar. The stone is a little bit different, but there is stone. So there's variation to it, but it's not identical. I guess that's the best way I could characterize it.
Consider getting the specs for those materials and using the same?
No. We did look at the architecture of the building, but in light of the fact that there's no dedicated campus sort of architectural standards, we wanted to complement the look of that building, but not replicate it. And that's what our design approach was.
Thanks. How about the glass specs? I noticed on your material sheet, it just says clear glass, and I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure that's not what you mean.
Well,
Like, we're talking low E glass, because this is a town building.
yeah, well,
energy code
it
and-
will have logo E glass, but it won't be tinted. I guess that's the point. And I believe the development code, if I remember correctly, doesn't allow tinted glass. I believe it needs to be clear.
Tinted versus coatings, kind of gets into semantics for a minute.
Yeah,
but
but this is not going to
it's
be,
a performance question, really. That's what-
yes, and
that's
it
a
will
town
be.
building, and
So,
energy's
so,
the issue.
so what we have is glazing that, and we've already done a comm check on this. And we are 3.8% above what comm check requires on the building envelope.
That was gonna be the next question.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, we've already gone through that. It's part of our design development package. And we do have low E glass on this building. It's just not tinted.
Great. And then I think the last one for you is, just growth. I think were you talking about this before? There's 50 people maybe capacity now, and we're growing to 70. I just noticed that the second floor is all cut up into small offices. And those really kind of restrict growth of staff over time, as opposed to more of an open floor plan. And this is a little bit out of our purview. I'm just kind of
Sure,
generally
I
curious
understand that.
how you guys think about.
Well,
staff.
what we have here is we do have, around the perimeters, we do have private offices here, here, and here. There are, and this came directly from, the needs of the staff. So we've got 4 open, office cubicles right here as well.
Unassigned space.
Not, I believe the way that it is, it's not permanently assigned to individuals. Yeah,
Fair enough.
so it could be shared space.
Great. And then my last question is actually probably for Norris, but it's hard for me to tell on any of the site materials I've seen what the hardscape connection between the existing building and Slopeside Hall is. And I'm just thinking it's going to be all day long. People walk in between those 2 structures. So did I miss it?
Well,
Is there a better drawing that shows it?
we do have this future plaza design that's going to answer that. And maybe Megan is also on. Megan, could you address that question?
Short-term solution that turns into something.
I don't know.
Hi.
There she is.
Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you, commissioners. Thanks, Dave. Yes, to address that question, I'm excited to tell you that shortly, when we get to this future plaza design in front of you, we will be doing a very integrated design that will really tie this area together and help to integrate this building fully into the campus of the PRA. And in the interim, we have a sidewalk ADA connection from Slopeside Hall to the future plaza so that there will be a hard path. However, in the construction sequencing, we will see how long that has to be there. And in the long run, there will be a fully integrated design that will be forthcoming.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Mhm.
Thank you, Patrick. Ira, questions?
Yeah, questions. So you indicated that we went from a standing seam roof to the asphalt roof and lost some square footage of stone. Did that help you to pay for the PV?
The PV.
The photovoltaics?
Oh, actually the photovoltaic system, according to our, correct me if I'm wrong about this, it came in almost neutral. So as far as cost standpoint, that was not our agenda to try to pay for one thing by eliminating something else. This was just simply our attempt to try to reduce costs on the building as much as possible. So, it wasn't a trade-off.
And you mentioned, because initially you had a gas-fired heating system and now it's electric?
We started off that way, yeah, and everything's electric now.
So there's no gas in the building?
No gas.
No gas.
Mhm.
Okay, that's it for me.
Thank you, Robert.
So as you put in the photovoltaic system, where'd you put the batteries? Because it's got to have a battery component to it, and I didn't see.
I'm going to ask Bob to respond to that if he can.
Yeah, it won't have any on-site storage for the photovoltaic system. The design is to maintain connection to the grid and then have a net meter type system that will store power on the grid and then draw it off when you need extra power.
Okay. Thank you. In making the accessible, and I appreciate the accessible bathrooms on the first floor, I wanted to make sure that they will be positive switches, not kind of net zero doors or for those accessible restrooms. That was a question.
I don't know that we've gotten that far on the design, but we can certainly make note of that.
Do you mean for the light fixtures?
No, to the doorway going in.
The doorway, okay.
We're talking.
I just went through this with a church, so especially with people on crutches, if you use zero energy, or I don't know, there's zero pressure doors, it's
Oh.
still almost impossible to get out of a restroom once you get into a restroom if you don't have a switch that allows the door to open automatically.
You're talking about a power activated.
Right, yes.
ADA
Door.
power activated door. Yeah, truly, we have not gotten it that far into the design, but we'll take note of that.
And will the locker room be accessible?
The locker room is accessible.
Okay.
Yeah, via the elevator.
Well, I mean, accessible inside because it's got a bathroom in there for
Yes,
for
that,
staff.
if you look at this, it may be a little bit difficult to see on the screen, but
I was
this whole
looking
thing
at
is.
it, I thought that it had a 3
Yeah,
foot,
this whole
but
thing, like you can see this water closet here.
Right.
It's got the accessible range around the toilet.
Yeah.
The shower is shown with a handicap flip down seat,
okay.
and the sink will also be accessible.
I couldn't see it on the drawing.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's kind of tough to see at this point.
And then I think that's it. I will hold the rest for my comments.
Thank you. Andy,
Certainly.
I think it's your turn, or did you already speak? No.
I haven't. I don't have any further questions for the applicant.
Great.
Thanks. No.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any public comments? I believe everybody here is from the applicant, or is there a public comment? Anybody want to make a comment on behalf of the public? Okay, seeing none, moving on to commissioner comments. And Andy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think, we were generally in favor of the project before. I think I'm still in favor of it. I appreciate the cosmetic changes that you made to kind of address some of our issues. I really look forward to seeing the landscape plan, Megan. I know it's going to be awesome, but one thing that for me, the renderings that we got in our packet didn't include some of the screening in the 3D renderings around those new condenser units. And looking at the renderings that were just put on screen, I don't know that those screens are the most attractive way we could hide those condenser units. I understand that they're on one of the least visible corners. I wouldn't mind seeing those screens a little bit more attractive, but I think that from what I can tell, it's going to be critical that that we do screen those with some landscaping as well, because coming down Recreation Way and you're looking right at those mechanical screens, and in 2D, yeah, they look like they're screening the units pretty well, but when you're actually moving past it, I think we're going to see a lot of those condensers, and the screens are going to look just like screens that were placed in front of them. So I want to make sure that those are doing their job, and that everything's well screened on that back corner for those condenser units. But other than that, I think you guys are on a great track. I can't wait to see the next round and see this connected to the Day Lodge a little bit more. Thanks.
Andy. Robert?
I really appreciate the changes that were made. I look forward to the plaza and how it all connects together at some point. I don't have a problem with the 35-foot roof, to answer the specific questions. And I don't have a problem with the west wall articulation at all. I think we pretty well said that before. I do hope that I do look forward to the building, and I think it'll be great. I suspect we're going to need more parking. I know what you say, but I watch your eyes light up when you talk about additional programming. So I think that will just be something we'll have to deal with when the time comes. So I think that you all have done a really great job with this project, and I look forward to seeing it built.
Thanks, Robert. Ira?
I would echo, I think you guys have done a great job. Being a resident of Frisco, having the amenity of the peninsula and this building, I feel very lucky to be in a community that has this kind of an amenity. I'm hoping that plaza and connectivity development is simultaneous, or whenever construction starts, that the connectivity between the day lodge and this building will be simultaneous and not have to wait for that to happen. And kudos, I think it's a great looking building there. Can't wait to see it.
Thank you. Patrick?
Yeah, I'm also gonna commend the design team. I think it's a great project. I know programming these things with so many stakeholders is tricky. Looks like it's all been pretty balanced. Really, the only thing aside from other questions I asked that is a concern for me. I mean, I appreciate that the materiality is related yet different. The one that kind of sticks on me a little bit is the color of the siding. I feel like it's kind of orange, and I feel like I just know what that color tends to do in bright sun, and it gets cooked out really, really quickly. So I would love to see a slightly different variation of color tone there, but aside from that, I'm good with the rest.
My comments, I like the project. I think I even like the reduction in the stone. I think there was way too much stone on it last time. I do think that we're gonna have parking issues too, but I think I made that comment last time, so well, I guess we'll deal with that when it happens. And I can't wait to see the Plaza connection, and otherwise, yeah, great project.
I have one more
Oh,
comment.
yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to compliment staff and the town for building a net zero building. I get so frustrated with building all these buildings and not putting photovoltaic on them. And I think that you all listened and council agreed. And I think it's just a really great thing that we're going to build a building that is net zero. So
Thank you.
it says a lot to staff and to the town council and to everybody and the architects involved. So
Thanks, Robert. My one last comment is, I think whatever you did to make that one, I think it's a roof staircase, look less like a church, I think that worked. So, thank you. Yeah, but it worked. So,
you want a motion?
yes.
With respect to file number MAJ-21-0008, I move the recommended findings set forth in the March 3, 2022 staff report be made, and that the recommended conditions set forth therein be taken, and that the Planning Commission hereby approves the request for the major site plan application for the proposed multi-purpose recreation building located at 605 Recreation Way at the Peninsula Recreation Area.
I'll second that.
Cheryl, can we get a vote?
Commissioner Franken,
Yes.
Commissioner Lazzarus,
Yes.
Commissioner Kane,
Yes.
Commissioner Gleason,
Yes.
Commissioner Deal.
Yes.
Thank you.
It is unanimous. Motion carries. Any staff updates?
First, does not look like we have a meeting on March 17th, so
Patrick's Day.
nothing to do with it. Completely, yeah. Completely coincidental. Other than that, I think Cheryl is prepping and has let the four of you that are, whose terms are up, know that that your terms are expiring at the end of April, and inviting you to all to reapply. Application public that will be put out to the public for people that may want to be. Next week, I think they're going to be going out there. Appointments and interviews will be done by town council at their May 6th meeting. Other than that, I don't have a ton of updates.
Update on Feldman project at Granite, because I see a building, a construction building going up there.
You see a red tag on that as well.
I hadn't noticed the red tag.
There is also a red tag.
What about the Centura?
They have submitted a building permit. They are still working to meet some of the energy code requirements and get a submittal that meets the full energy code.
I
They have submitted a permit for one of the 3 buildings. Not the entire.
Any progress on Rainbow Court?
They have submitted, okay, so yes, first of all, the Hotel Frisco has obviously made repairs. They did some shoring of that side so that that hotel is stable and reopened. The Rainbow Court project has submitted an additional an amendment to their or a modification to their foundation plan. They are still also awaiting their full building modeling to move on to their or energy modeling so they can get the full permit. They're not at work at the moment, obviously.
And last but not least, and we ask it all the time, Foots Rest.
A building permit was actually submitted back in December.
Yep.
They are working through, they've got a contractor. We, again, tentatively, we're anticipating that they'll be working to break ground in April or May. I certainly suspect that we will hear a press release from their team when they're getting ready to do so.
So we've approved their building permit. Or you
No, the
have?
building permit's not approved yet. We're
Okay.
still working through review of the building permit.
Okay.
And again, since it's a very large commercial structure, the energy modeling is a big challenge with a lot of that under our current sustainable building codes. But they are working through that, and I have faith that they'll meet it.
Does that mean our building code is wrong, or does that mean people are just learning how to deal with that part of our building code?
That's an interesting question that we could probably have a good philosophical discussion about. Town of Frisco fully implemented the 2018 Summit Sustainable Building Code effective January 1st, 2021. Summit County, Breckenridge, the other jurisdictions, they have not. They're still in a training period where buildings are being built and not meeting that sustainable building code or the energy portions of it. So I think certainly it's an ongoing discussion in Breckenridge and Summit County where they do some very, very large residential structures. And I think that's where the biggest challenges are. In Frisco, most of the houses that we see are much smaller just because we have smaller lots. We just don't have that same type of structure here. So we've had several projects go through 2CO that have met the full code. So
awesome.
Hey, Don,
Yes, sir.
what's the, any movement on the Excelsior building, or is our current plan to hope it just rots into the ground before we have to deal with it?
I will say as an appreciator of historic structures, that is not my hope that it just rots into the ground.
No, mine neither.
So yeah, I think that certainly is an ongoing question that staff has, is what ultimately the fate of that building is, what the best location for that building is, what the best reuse of that building is. I don't like, I think the best use of a historic building is actually to have them being used. And so
Yeah.
finding a good appropriate location for that, I've got my own ideas in my head. And I think a lot of people will do or do as well. I think there's discussions about potential locations for that, but that does have to go ultimately through town council since they're the project owner on that. It's on the priority list, but it's not one of their highest priorities at this point in time. Housing is taking the
Sure.
the highest point on that.
No, I'm just curious because I know it's just sitting there in a temporary situation, and hoping we can find something to do with that before it does become unusable.
Yeah, I do too.
The structure is stable. I will say that when they moved it, it was stabilized, so it is okay to sit there for a while and not deteriorate. But
Yeah.
certainly, I think I would rather see it used sooner than later.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Move we adjourn.
Yep.
Yes.
All right.
Everybody say aye.
Great job, Lena. Good job.
Good job, Lena.
It's the red one that's